Julian, known as the Thornback, sits alone in the woods, letting the silence wash over him. The weight of his pack's cruel nickname has never been heavier, and yet, it feels like it defines him more each day. His thoughts are interrupted when Heath, now a shadow of the once proud provisional alpha, appears before him. Heath proposes a deal, a fate mating bond for political survival. Julian's heart hardens, but he agrees, vowing to take his revenge during the mating ceremony. Heath's desperation is palpable, his plea for help laden with guilt. He explains how his position as alpha is precarious, and only the appearance of a stable mate can save him. Julian listens, his mind already planning how to humiliate Heath in front of the pack. The pain of being rejected years ago still lingers in his chest, but now, he sees an opportunity to hurt Heath as deeply as he was hurt. The tension between them is thick, but Heath doesn't seem to realize the venom in Julian's eyes. Julian agrees to the fake bond, but only for one reason: revenge. The thought of rejecting Heath in front of the entire pack makes him feel powerful, like he's finally taking control of the years of emotional torment Heath put him through. Heath leaves, promising to arrange the details. As the sound of his footsteps fades, Julian's thoughts drift back to the past. It's been 12 long years since Heath, the provisional alpha, rejected him in favor of Scarlet. That betrayal has festered inside him ever since, and now, Julian is determined to make Heath feel the same loneliness and pain he has felt all this time. The days following Heath's proposal are filled with restlessness. Julian can't shake the image of Heath's pleading face from his mind. The betrayal from so long ago still stings, but there's a dark thrill in his chest now, a burning desire to destroy everything Heath has worked for. He stands alone in front of the mirror, tracing the scar on his cheek, a reminder of how deep the rejection cut him. He pulls on his leather jacket and heads into the forest, the weight of his pack's scorn ever present. As he runs, he thinks about the day Heath chose Scarlet over him. He was young, naive, and had trusted Heath with everything. The day Heath abandoned him for Scarlet was the day Julian lost any hope of a future with the Alpha. Now, that lost future will be his weapon. As the first signs of dawn break, Julian's heart hardens even further. He swears to himself that this mating ceremony will be the end of Heath's pride, the destruction of everything Heath holds dear. Julian will publicly reject him, just as Heath once rejected him. It will be the ultimate vengeance, and Julian is prepared to go through with it. But deep inside, something stirs. A faint, nagging feeling that perhaps his plan won't bring the satisfaction he expects. Still, he pushes that thought away. Revenge is what has kept him alive all these years, and he won't let go of that now. The first night of their arranged, fake mate, bond arrives. Julian stands at the edge of the pack gathering, eyes fixed on Heath as he approaches. Heath's posture is stiff, the weight of their past hanging between them. Julian watches as Heath offers him a tentative smile, the same smile that once made him feel special, cherished. But now, it only fills him with bitterness. Flashbacks flood Julian's mind, the day Heath rejected him in front of the pack, choosing Scarlet, his selfishness cutting through Julian like a blade. He remembers the tears he fought to hold back, the whispers of the pack that followed him as he fled the ceremony. The shame, the humiliation. All of it is still so vivid. Heath's voice calls him back to the present, and Julian forces a smile, hiding the anger that burns inside him. Their fake bond begins that night, though Julian feels none of the warmth or tenderness he once imagined he would. Instead, he feels nothing but cold resentment as Heath tries to make small talk. The thin veneer of politeness between them is suffocating, and Julian's heart beats faster, not with excitement, but with fury. He can already imagine the moment when he will crush Heath's world with a single word. But as the evening wears on, Julian notices the fatigue in Heath's eyes, the quiet sadness that speaks volumes. Heath isn't the arrogant alpha he once was. He's broken, stripped of the pride he once wore so proudly. Julian feels a flicker of doubt, perhaps Heath is not the villain he thought. But he quickly dismisses it. Heath is still the same alpha who rejected him, and that betrayal will never be forgotten. Julian and Heath meet in private to finalize the terms of their arrangement. Heath's eyes are weary, haunted by a past that won't let him go. Julian notices, but doesn't care. He's focused solely on his plan to destroy Heath's reputation. They agree on their roles, and Heath suggests they start preparing for the ceremony where they will publicly announce their mating. Julian nods, but in his mind, it's already clear what will happen next: rejection. Heath speaks about their bond as if it's something real, something that can be salvaged, but Julian is unmoved. All Julian wants is to see Heath kneel before him in humiliation. It's the only thing that will bring him peace, he tells himself. Heath, still unaware of Julian's true intentions, talks about their future together as a pack, the political benefits of their union. As the conversation continues, Julian feels a strange pull in his chest, an unfamiliar tension. He doesn't want to admit it, but something inside him stirs when Heath looks at him with that glimmer of hope in his eyes. It doesn't last long. Julian quickly pushes the thought away, reminding himself of the plan. Revenge is all that matters. When Heath leaves, Julian stands alone, torn between the anger that has fueled him for years and a confusing sense of something deeper, something he hasn't felt in a long time. But he ignores it, determined to carry out his mission, no matter the cost. As Julian spends more time with Heath, he begins to see the cracks in Heath's exterior. The man who once rejected him seems to carry an invisible weight. Heath tries to engage Julian in conversations about their past, but Julian keeps his distance, refusing to acknowledge the pain that stirs inside him. He focuses on the task at hand, the public rejection. But every time Heath looks at him, Julian feels a sharp pang in his chest. It's not pity he sees in Heath's eyes, but regret. The guilt in Heath's gaze makes Julian feel unsettled. He reminds himself that this is all part of the plan, but it's becoming harder to keep his emotions in check. The past that he's worked so hard to bury begins to surface in painful flashes. Julian begins to question whether revenge is really what he wants. Heath's presence, his vulnerability, makes Julian's anger feel less clear, less justified. But then, the memory of the betrayal comes rushing back, the way Heath chose Scarlett over him, breaking his heart in front of the entire pack. That wound is still raw, and the desire for retribution pulses in Julian's veins. The tension between them grows. Heath notices the distance Julian keeps, but doesn't press him further. There's something unspoken between them, a recognition of the past that neither is ready to confront. The fake bond, for now, remains a fragile illusion. The mating ceremony is fast approaching, and Julian's resolve strengthens with each passing day. He plans to stand before the pack, make his rejection public, and destroy Heath's last hope of redemption. But the more he thinks about it, the more conflicted he becomes. Heath's brokenness is becoming harder to ignore. In private moments, Heath continues to apologize, to explain his choices, but Julian remains unmoved. He's heard it all before, how Heath was manipulated by Scarlett, how Heath was young and naive. But Julian can't forgive the hurt. He can't forget how easily Heath abandoned him for another. The anger festers, a slow burn that fuels him. As the ceremony date draws closer, the two men exchange fewer words. The weight of their past looms heavily over every interaction. Julian can no longer pretend to be indifferent. His feelings, once buried under layers of hatred, now surface like a tide he can't control. Heath, unaware of Julian's internal conflict, prepares for the ceremony with a quiet hope. His eyes, once filled with arrogance, now show vulnerability, an openness Julian can't ignore. But Julian pushes it away, focusing solely on the moment of rejection that will give him the closure he craves. The tension between Julian and Heath becomes unbearable as the ceremony looms closer. They are forced to spend more time together, rehearsing their roles, interacting as if the bond were real. Julian's resolve weakens each time Heath looks at him with those desperate eyes. He starts to see something different in Heath, regret, yes, but also a flicker of something else. Julian has always prided himself on being in control of his emotions, but with Heath, it's impossible to ignore the shifting feelings inside him. Heath's touch, his voice, his presence, it all stirs something Julian thought was long buried. The attraction is undeniable, and it scares him. If he admits to himself that he still feels something for Heath, the plan will fall apart. But as the days pass, the lines between fake and real blur. Julian wonders if his desire for revenge was just a mask for something deeper, something that has always existed between them. Heath may have rejected him once, but the connection they shared is still there, unspoken but powerful. The ceremony approaches, and Julian finds himself questioning everything. Can he really go through with the rejection? Or has the past, with all its pain and betrayal, been something he can finally move beyond? Julian and Heath share an intimate moment when a rare moment of quiet falls over them. It's the first time they've been alone without the looming shadow of the ceremony, and something shifts between them. Heath hesitantly reaches out, as if asking for permission to bridge the gap between them. Julian's heart races, and for a fleeting second, he almost lets go of the anger that's defined him. Heath confesses how much he regrets losing Julian, how he's spent years wishing he could take back the mistakes he made. Julian listens, but his mind is clouded with doubt. He never expected to hear these words from Heath. The Heath he knew was arrogant and prideful, not a man broken by his choices. But the temptation to forgive, to let the old wounds heal, is too great. Julian stands on the precipice, unsure of what to do. Everything he thought he knew about Heath, about himself, is shifting. The man who rejected him 12 years ago now stands before him, vulnerable and remorseful. Julian steps back, his resolve hardening once again. The plan isn't over, not yet. He can't let himself fall for Heath's words, can't let go of the revenge he's been waiting for. But deep inside, a small part of him wonders if he's already lost the battle. The respected Alpha and his stargazer mate arrive to offer counsel. They sense the conflict between Julian and Heath and offer their wisdom. The stargazer, with her sharp eyes and understanding of the heart, speaks to Julian, urging him to see the full picture of his relationship with Heath. Her words echo in Julian's mind long after they leave. She speaks of fate, of bonds stronger than anger and resentment, and of the healing power of forgiveness. Julian is torn. He's spent so long holding onto his pain, and now, the idea of forgiving Heath feels like betrayal. Despite the wisdom they offer, Julian's thoughts remain focused on the rejection. He can't let go of the anger that has defined him for so long. Yet, there's a nagging voice in the back of his mind, urging him to consider that perhaps this isn't about revenge at all. As the Alpha and Stargazer leave, Julian is left alone with his thoughts. The path ahead seems murky, and for the first time, he isn't sure which choice will bring him peace. Boundaries. Julian and Heath are forced to confront their feelings when a challenge within the pack arises. They must present a united front, their bond, real or fake, tested by external forces. Heath steps into his role as Alpha with a strength Julian hadn't anticipated, and Julian finds himself admiring him, despite himself. The tension between them continues to build. As they face their first major challenge together, Julian can't ignore the way Heath commands respect and how natural he feels by Heath's side. For a moment, the line between fake and real vanishes entirely. Heath's presence fills the space between them, and Julian is unsure where the pretense ends and the truth begins. But Julian remains guarded, refusing to let his feelings show. He can't afford to be weak, to be vulnerable. The rejection is still on the horizon, the ceremony still to come, and he mustn't lose sight of his original goal. Yet, the more time he spends with Heath, the more he questions whether this path will truly bring him peace. Heath, for his part, seems to sense the shift in their dynamic but doesn't push. He lets Julian lead, knowing that the power balance between them is delicate. The challenge forces them to work together, but it also forces Julian to confront the growing bond he feels. Ceremony draws near. The date of the mating ceremony is now only a few days away. Julian feels the pressure mounting, the weight of his plan bearing down on him. Each day spent with Heath makes the task at hand more difficult, but Julian clings to the hope that once the rejection is public, he'll finally have the closure he so desperately craves. Heath, on the other hand, seems to be losing himself in the preparation, each moment spent with Julian filling him with a mix of hope and fear. Despite the tension, Julian continues to see the vulnerability in Heath's eyes, a look that tells him the Alpha isn't as confident as he appears. Julian's anger flares again, but it's tempered with confusion. Is this really about revenge, or has something deeper started to take root within him? The thought terrifies him, and he pushes it away, focusing on the task at hand. Heath notices the growing distance between them, but instead of confronting it, he silently accepts it. He knows Julian's heart is still closed off to him, but he can't help but hold on to the belief that there's still a chance for them, even if it's just a glimmer. He knows Julian's hurt, but he's willing to do anything to prove that he's changed, that he can be the mate Julian always deserved. But as the ceremony draws closer, Julian's heart grows heavier with the thought of rejecting Heath in front of the pack. He never anticipated that the line between hate and love could blur so easily, and the doubt creeps in. Still, the plan must proceed. The night before the ceremony, Julian spends the hours leading up to it in solitude. His mind races, replaying every moment with Heath over the past weeks. He remembers the anger that had once burned so brightly in him, the pain of being abandoned. But now, there's something else, a complicated mix of longing and confusion. He doesn't know if he can go through with the public rejection. Heath approaches him in the quiet of the night, sensing the inner turmoil Julian is experiencing. He stands before Julian, not as an alpha, but as someone who's desperately trying to earn back what he lost. "I know I don't deserve this," Heath says softly, his voice raw. "But please, don't destroy us before we even begin." Julian wants to push him away, to reject him once and for all, but the words won't come. Instead, he finds himself looking into Heath's eyes, seeing something real there, something that might be worth fighting for. The anger that once fueled him begins to dissipate, replaced by a growing uncertainty about his next move. The silence between them grows, heavy with the weight of unspoken words. Julian knows that whatever happens in the morning will change everything. The ceremony is set, and there's no turning back now. The morning of the ceremony arrives, and Julian feels the cold rush of anxiety in his veins. As he prepares for what should be the culmination of his revenge, he can't help but feel the pull of something else, a desire for something he never thought he could have. Heath stands at his side, looking every bit the alpha he once was, but Julian can see the cracks in his armor. Heath is ready to face whatever comes, but Julian isn't sure he is. At the ceremony, the pack gathers, their eyes fixed on the two of them. The air is thick with anticipation. Julian steps forward, the weight of his decision pressing on him. This is the moment when he will reject Heath, publicly and decisively. But as he opens his mouth to speak, he falters. The words feel wrong, like a betrayal of something he can't quite understand. Heath looks at him, and for the first time, Julian sees the true depth of his regret. It's not just guilt over the past, but a plea for forgiveness, a desire to make things right. The crowd watches in silence as Julian stands frozen, unable to speak the words that would sever their bond. The moment stretches on, unbearable in its tension. Julian knows what he should do, but his heart refuses to let him. For the first time, he doubts his plan entirely. In front of the entire pack, Julian stands motionless. The rejection he had carefully planned seems impossible to voice now. The crowd waits with bated breath, and Heath's eyes are full of quiet hope. Julian feels torn between the man he once loved and the man who had hurt him so deeply. His anger is still there, but now it's mixed with something else, understanding, perhaps even empathy. Heath steps forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Julian, please. If this isn't what you want, I'll understand. But I need you to know I've changed. I need you." His words hang in the air, fragile and full of longing. For a moment, Julian is tempted to give in, to step away from the revenge he thought would heal him. But the pack is watching, and Julian knows that rejection is expected. Yet, in his heart, the decision feels wrong. How can he destroy everything they could have, everything Heath wants to rebuild, just for the sake of revenge? Finally, Julian speaks, but not the words anyone expected. "I can't do it." The silence in the room is deafening. The decision has been made, but it isn't the one Julian thought he would make. After the ceremony, Julian retreats to the woods, his mind spinning. The decision he made haunts him, the weight of the choice heavier than he expected. He thought rejecting Heath would bring closure, but now, all he feels is confusion. His feelings for Heath are still there, tangled with resentment, but also something new, a willingness to try again, to rebuild. Heath finds him in the woods, his expression unreadable. "You didn't reject me," he says softly, more a statement than a question. Julian nods, the truth of his actions sinking in. He didn't reject Heath, but that doesn't mean everything is resolved. The path forward is unclear, and Julian feels a mixture of relief and fear. The pack is watching them, their expectations shattered. Heath's position as alpha is now more precarious than ever, and Julian knows the consequences will be severe. The rebellion that is likely to follow weighs on them both. Heath takes Julian's hand, and for the first time in years, Julian doesn't pull away. But the road ahead is uncertain. Julian's heart is still guarded, but the possibility of something real, something beyond revenge, begins to take root. The pack is in turmoil after the ceremony, their whispers filled with doubt and anger. Julian and Heath are now at the center of it all. Heath's authority as alpha is in jeopardy, and Julian's reputation as the Thornback is being challenged once again. But amidst the chaos, they find themselves growing closer, the walls they've built around themselves beginning to crack. Heath approaches Julian, apologizing again for the way he handled things years ago. Julian listens, but he doesn't respond immediately. The pain of the past is still fresh, but now there's a flicker of something else, healing. He realizes that, despite everything, he's been holding onto the anger that kept him from moving forward. They walk together through the woods, the silence between them comfortable now. Julian's heart is still guarded, but he's beginning to let go of the resentment that has consumed him for so long. Heath doesn't push him, but his presence is a constant reminder of the past they shared. The path to forgiveness is slow, but Julian is starting to see that it's possible. Whether they'll be able to rebuild their bond, only time will tell. As the days pass, the tension in the pack grows. Julian's decision to spare Heath has caused unrest among those who still believe in the traditional ways. The Council of Alphas is murmuring about the future of Heath's leadership, and some begin to see Julian as a symbol of weakness. But Heath's unwavering support for Julian gives him strength, and Julian starts to realize that he can't let his past define his future. Late one night, Julian meets with Heath privately. "They are starting to question you," Julian says quietly. "You're risking everything for me." Heath's eyes are filled with determination as he takes Julian's hand. "I'm not risking anything, Julian. I'm doing what's right. What we both need." Despite the turmoil, Julian feels the sincerity in Heath's words. The scars from the past are deep, but in this moment, they begin to fade. Julian starts to understand that forgiveness is not just about moving on, it's about building something new together. The question of whether they can truly find peace remains, but Julian is willing to explore it. Heath's resolve gives Julian the courage to take the first step. They decide to confront the pack, to face the challenges ahead together. But they both know that this decision will change everything, either for the better or for the worse. The time has come for Julian and Heath to address the pack. The Council of Alphas demands answers, and the pressure mounts as the two face the rest of the pack. Julian stands by Heath, his resolve firm, despite the whispers of doubt swirling around them. Heath addresses the pack first, acknowledging the unrest and the challenges ahead. But his words aren't just for the pack, they are for Julian, too. Julian takes a deep breath and steps forward. "I know many of you think my actions were a betrayal," he says, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But I believe in second chances. I believe in change." The room falls silent as Julian speaks, the weight of his words settling over the pack. Some of the pack members are skeptical, but others begin to nod, understanding the sincerity in Julian's voice. Heath stands beside him, a silent promise in his eyes. Julian has chosen to stand by him, and now the pack will have to decide whether they will do the same. The moment is pivotal. The pack's future hangs in the balance, and the bond between Heath and Julian is tested once again. The decision they make now will determine whether they can move forward together, or if the wounds of the past will forever divide them. The pack's decision is not as simple as Julian hoped. While some members begin to support them, others are determined to see Heath's leadership crumble. Julian feels the weight of the pack's judgment, but there's one unexpected ally in their midst, an elder alpha named Marcus, who has seen the bond between Heath and Julian since the beginning. Marcus steps forward at the council meeting, his voice booming with authority. "This pack has been torn apart by tradition and pride for too long," he says. "We can either choose to hold on to the past or embrace the future. Heath and Julian have made their choice. It's time we make ours." His words strike a chord with many, and the atmosphere shifts. The younger alphas, once skeptical, begin to reassess their stance. Julian feels a flicker of hope that perhaps they can make a difference after all. But the battle isn't over. The Council's approval is only the first step in a long journey toward reconciliation. As the meeting adjourns, Julian feels a strange sense of peace. They've won a battle, but the war is far from over. Yet, for the first time, Julian believes that they might actually have a chance at rebuilding what was broken. With Marcus's support, Julian and Heath begin to navigate the delicate politics of their pack. But every victory comes with a price. As Julian becomes more involved in the pack's decisions, he starts to see the darker side of leadership, the manipulations, the betrayals, and the sacrifices that are often made in the name of power. One evening, Julian confronts Heath. "Is this really what you want?" he asks. "To lead this pack? To carry the weight of their expectations?" Heath looks at him, his expression conflicted. "I never wanted this," he admits. "But I have a responsibility. I can't abandon them now. Not when they need me most." Julian understands, but the burden of leadership is heavy. He knows that Heath is not just carrying the weight of the pack's future but also the guilt of his past mistakes. The pressure threatens to tear them apart, and Julian wonders if they are strong enough to survive the storm ahead. As Heath and Julian stand together, they know the road ahead will be fraught with challenges. But they also know that they are not facing it alone. Together, they will fight for the future they both want, even if it means making difficult sacrifices along the way. The tension within the pack continues to grow, and Julian begins to notice something strange. There are whispers of a plot to undermine Heath's leadership, a conspiracy that threatens to expose secrets buried deep within the pack's history. Julian's instincts tell him that there's more going on than meets the eye, and he begins to dig into the mystery. As he investigates, Julian uncovers a hidden truth. Heath's former Luna, Scarlet, may have been involved in a scheme to destabilize the pack. Julian's heart races as he realizes that the betrayal they suffered all those years ago may have been part of something much larger. The stakes are higher than he thought. Heath is shocked when Julian reveals what he's learned. "Scarlet," Heath murmurs, his voice filled with disbelief. "She's been pulling the strings all along?" Julian nods, the weight of the discovery sinking in. They are not just fighting for their bond, they are fighting for the survival of their entire pack. Together, Julian and Heath vow to expose the conspiracy and protect the future of their pack. But they know that doing so will come at a cost. Trust will be broken, and sacrifices will have to be made. Julian and Heath prepare to confront Scarlet and her allies. They know that exposing the conspiracy will shake the foundation of the pack, but they can't let the lies go unchallenged. The confrontation is tense, and the stakes couldn't be higher. As Julian and Heath step into the den where Scarlet waits, the tension in the air is palpable. Scarlet doesn't deny the accusations. Instead, she smirks, her eyes filled with disdain. "You're too late," she sneers. "The pack is mine to control now." "Heath, you're weak. You always were." Julian steps forward, his anger rising. "You've manipulated everything, destroyed lives, and now you think you can just take over?" The confrontation escalates, with Scarlet and her followers refusing to back down. Heath and Julian fight not just for their leadership but for the future of their pack. The battle is brutal, but they refuse to give up. In the end, it's not just physical strength that wins, it's their unwavering commitment to each other and their pack. Scarlet is exposed, and the conspiracy falls apart. The pack is shaken, but they've come through stronger. Julian and Heath stand victorious, knowing that their bond has been tested in the crucible of truth. With the conspiracy unraveled, the pack begins to rebuild. Trust is a fragile thing, and Julian knows that it will take time to restore the faith that was lost. As he works alongside Heath to heal the wounds inflicted by Scarlet's treachery, Julian realizes that their relationship is a reflection of the pack's journey. Trust, once broken, can be rebuilt, but only with patience and effort. Heath's leadership is solid once again, but he and Julian both understand that they can't rest on their laurels. There will always be challenges ahead, but together, they are stronger than ever. Julian finally allows himself to believe in their future, in the possibility of a life free from the shadows of the past. The bond between them grows deeper, as they share not just love but a commitment to each other's well-being. The pack begins to heal, and Julian starts to see the first signs of unity. The journey has been long, but they've made it through the storm. The road ahead is still uncertain, but for the first time, Julian feels confident in the strength of their bond. They've faced their demons, and now, they can look to the future. As Julian and Heath look to the future, they know that the journey is far from over. They've conquered the challenges of the past, but new obstacles will always arise. However, with each victory, their bond grows stronger and their love deepens. Together, they begin to chart a course for their pack's future, one that is built on trust, respect, and unity. Julian no longer sees himself as the thornback, the unmated wolf. He is Heath's mate, and he is proud of it. The anger that once consumed him has been replaced by a sense of peace and purpose. He knows that he and Heath can face anything, as long as they stand together. As Julian and Heath stand side by side, looking out over the pack's territory, they know that the journey they've taken together has been life-changing. The pack has been restructured, their enemies defeated, and their bond solidified in the face of adversity. The scars of the past are still there, but they no longer define who they are. Together, they've created something new. The sun sets over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the land. Julian feels a warmth in his chest, a sense of belonging he never thought possible. "This is just the beginning," Heath says, his voice low but filled with hope. "There's still much to do, but we've made it through the hardest part." Julian nods, his heart swelling with pride. "We've done it together." The words are simple, but they carry a weight of meaning. They've fought side by side, healed together, and now they can finally look ahead to the future without the burden of past betrayals or secrets. As they walk hand in hand back to their den, Julian realizes that, despite everything they've been through, they've found their way to each other. Their journey hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. The future may still be uncertain, but with Heath by his side, Julian knows that whatever comes next, they'll face it together, stronger than ever before.